And I'm looking at Prince William and his wife touring about, and even the fact that someone who likes to think of himself as being fairly clear-eyed and whatever the antidote to forelock tugging is, I call him Prince William. I can't bring myself to describe the Queen in the way that I try to describe William and Kate Windsor. I can't do it. I have to call her Majesty. I have to call her the Queen. I've been brainwashed. I've been gaslit in the course of my life. I've got no beef with the Queen, but she's got no more right to an honorific like Her Majesty than my mum does. It's a complete accident of birth. I'm not even necessarily a Republican. I'm just a fan of highlighting the ridiculous. The sight of these two in sort of white military uniform, with stripy trousers, being carried around on chairs and knocking around on colonial era Land Rovers. It is objectively ridiculous. It is absolutely bonkers. And I think it's unsustainable. Because even a cursory understanding of Caribbean history will lead you to the conclusion that for many years, decades, Jamaica and other countries, other islands, they were just slave plantations. That's all they were. That's what they existed for. They were essentially, in a way, they were concentration camps where enslaved people worked for nothing in order to enrich their owners or their guards, their custodians, what's the word I'm looking for? Imprisoners isn't a word. What's the word I want? Like the people that imprisoned them. I'll now get about 1,000 messages telling me what word it is that I'm looking for. 13 minutes after 11 is the time. So I look at we may hear a little bit of this speech where he talks about the abhorrent history of slavery as they bade farewell to Jamaica yesterday. He talks about a stain on our history. And the appalling atrocity that has left such a heavy legacy in the Caribbean island. He also expressed his profound sorrow that the slave trade had ever happened. Yeah, okay, well, prove it, pal. You know, it's Charles II, really, when all this kicked off, and guess what chair he sat on when he became king? And really, you want a godfather of 17th century slavery or that era of slavery? You're probably looking at his brother who came to the throne afterwards, after Charles II, one of the Jameses. Here's the point. I think it's just unsustainable. I think the idea of the royal family having any role in the West Indies has this week become absolutely unsustainable. I don't know how long it will take, and I don't know how easy it will be, but I think you're looking at the last ever royal visit to the Caribbean. I just don't see how, given the way the world has turned, you can have these people, these living, breathing accidents of birth, marching around the place like lords and mistresses when the ground upon which they walk is soaked with the blood of enslaved people. It is absolutely incredible to me that in 2022 this is still a thing. And it took a caller yesterday to custodians. Custodians was the word I was looking for. It took a caller yesterday to remind me, because the question, I don't want to turn into Kanye, but the question that is kind of on the tip of my lips is not Kanye asked a question about why enslaved people didn't fight back and rebel more, which is an interjection of such astonishing ignorance that one is tempted to do what one never normally does and say, stick to music, mate. But the question of why post-slavery, that the colonial, the Commonwealth countries, and I'm thinking particularly of the West Indies, and I know an awful lot of listeners have roots in the Caribbean, and of course, ultimately in Africa, although you won't know about those roots because they were ripped from you the moment that you were put in chains and carried onto those ships. Oh, your ancestors were. But I got it. It fell into place because the mystery to me was, why has it taken so long to shrug off these shackles, to shrug off these historical shackles, for the Prime Minister of Jamaica to follow the lead of Barbados and say, you know what? The idea that we have a head of state who lives in England and we have to get a visa just to visit England, up with this we will not put. And a large part of the answer is the legacy, of course, of racism. And the fact that, as our caller reminded us yesterday, even now, the darkness of your skin, even if you're dark enough to be a victim of racism from white people, I'm very much on a journey learning this, prompted in large part by Michael Holding, the cricketer, who is one of the most inspirational and just fundamentally, what's the word I want? Again, sorry, it's my job to come up with the words, isn't it? I'm asking you to do all the heavy lifting today. Just one of the most insightful people I've ever interviewed. One of the people who you almost wish you didn't have to ask questions. You wish you could just sit back, fold your arms and listen to him. You can find the interview on the Full Disclosure series. It's just beautiful. I was so proud and humbled to do it. And you know me, I never feel humbled. And he explained to me about his mum being ostracised by her own family, her own West Indian family, because his dad was so dark. And that's a large part, I think, of how it has been sustained. What did we export to the Caribbean? Racism. A racism so toxic and so all-encompassing that it ended up polluting the black community on these islands. So I think the question I want you to answer is this. Am I right? Is that it now? Is the game up? It's not Prince William's fault. It's not William Windsor's fault. It's not his wife's fault. They just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or the wrong place at the right time, of course, if you're on the right side of history. But the idea of another, quotes, prince, end quotes, or another, quotes, duchess, end quotes, tooling around the West Indies, held upon the shoulders of the natives, or waving regally from a fancy Land Rover, or dressing up like a kind of cosplay Lord Mountbatten. I just don't think it can be sustained anymore. And I want to know whether you agree. That's all.